What is going on, guys? It is your boy NCS07 here, and welcome back to another review video. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the remake of Shadow of the Colossus on PlayStation 4. Now, just before we get into this review, just know that I did not play the original, so I don't know how that one plays. This is specific, or the PS3 remaster or whatever they put on there. Specifically, this is the first one I played, Shadow of the Colossus remake on PS4. So, let's get into this review. Starting off with, of course, the presentation. Now, this game is kind of different than, like, other games. Basically, it's set up that you travel to this place that no one really goes to because, more than likely, the big colossuses that exist there, and you have to kill them all, basically. Really, that's all there really is to the game. You basically just kill the colossuses, all 16 of them, and that's pretty much it. So honestly, it isn't really that interesting, like me saying it. However, when you go against these colossuses, which I will get to a little bit later, it is pretty cool. And of course, the game's graphics. Now, I will be honest, I think the game looks pretty good. However, I do think some things do look very PlayStation 3 like. I know that this was a full remake from the ground up, but it does kind of look like some models and stuff like that, or textures, just giving me this PS3 vibe, almost as if they were remastered PS3 textures and models. Not to say they look bad, but sometimes they just don't come off as exactly realistic and kind of still look like something from the 7th generation of games. But still, though, the game does really look good, especially when looking at the boundaries of where you can go, how big the world is, but I'll get to that later. And now going to the story. Now, there really isn't a lot of story to this game, and I already kind of mentioned part of it, so I'll clarify some more. Basically, you go to this place that no one is allowed to go to, so because of this girl who is basically asleep, and you have to kill the colossuses to wake her up, basically. That's pretty much all there is to it, and I won't spoil anything that happens later in the game, because nothing really happens until the final segment of the game, but I'm not going to say anything about that, so moving on to the gameplay. Honestly, the story's fine. Really not that much to it, but it's fine. It has that mysterious kind of feeling, like you don't really know where you are. But now on to the gameplay. Now, the gameplay of this game is pretty different from that of other games that came before it. Like other games, you're able to go around this world killing monsters, but the thing is, there's no monsters that you actually really fight against except for the colossuses. Essentially, you go around the world and you have to find a specific location where one of the colossuses is, and then you have to kill it. And these colossuses are, well, as they say, as it's in the name, colossal enemies. These huge things that just tower over you. And basically, therefore, you've got to climb it. You have to climb it, and there's other things you do. It's different for each one. But for most of them, you need to basically get onto them, climb on a part of them, and go to these spots, glowy spots, and stab them with your sword, basically. And you eventually kill one, and you move on to the next. There's really nothing else to it other than killing the colossuses. And honestly, killing the colossuses is actually not bad. They're well made, well designed, and they're fun to do. It's definitely different from any other game at that point, since you really never go against something this huge, but it is really, really cool. However, there is one thing I will say I do have a bit of an issue with, and that is the rest of what you do. Now, like I said before, the game's world is very big. The game's world is huge, massive, because obviously you're going to need some space to fight some of the colossuses. However, this is my biggest criticism with this game, and that is specifically the fact that this game has a lot of space that you never use. Yes, there are some big areas for that, so you can go and fight the colossuses. However, there's a lot of space that's just not really used, and it just doesn't feel as much like a world. There's a lot of areas where it's just grass or just sand without really much at all. occasionally you'll find something that's kind of interesting. But honestly, the world's kind of boring if you ask me. And also, it's really huge for no reason. From what I know, there isn't a teleportation system, so you can't really get around easily. Especially since after you kill a Colossus, you're teleported back to the central shrine, and you have to go from there to get to the next Colossus. You can't teleport around the map, at least from what I know. Maybe you can, but I didn't. I didn't know about it. But even so, the game's world is just so boring. There's not enough in it. There's not smaller enemies that you fight against or anything like that. Nothing. So it kind of gets a little boring. I understand they want to focus specifically on the Colossus, but it is kind of boring that that's the only real thing to the game. But, I don't know. Gameplay wise though, it's really, really solid, but really, really padded out as well. But I'll get more into the whole padding thing later. Moving on now to controls. Now, I actually do have some stuff to say about controls. They're not the best, and you can probably see it in my gameplay footage. The game's controls are pretty wonky, honestly. Not to say that they're bad, but they are very clunky occasionally, especially when you're climbing. Sometimes you just won't be able to reach another ledge because the game just will not let you, and sometimes when you're jumping from ledge to ledge, it just doesn't work very well. I do personally feel like they could have touched up the controls quite a bit, though they feel kind of clunky. I don't know. It's not my favorite thing ever, and it's not that they're super bad or unresponsive. It's just that I wish the controls were a lot better. I wish it was felt more fluid, but whatever. And now moving on to content. Now, the game is like 20 or 30 bucks. The game really doesn't have that much content. You could probably beat the game in like maybe 10 hours, because that's pretty much how much time it took for me to finish it. And like, yeah, you fight the 16 Colossuses, and that's pretty much it for the game. So there really isn't a lot of content. There is some other stuff you can do, but nothing really that enticing to the player. It just feels kind of eh. And while fighting the Colossuses doesn't take that much time, unless you're just bad at the game, other part of your time will basically be spent getting around the world. Yes, the world is really massive, but the thing is, it can take a long time to get to certain places. Especially since when you die, you restart back at the central shrine. So essentially, for each attempt, you're gonna more than likely have to go all the way back to where you were. At least on some of them. I'm not entirely sure, but even so, going from the central shrine to some of the areas for the Colossus, you're gonna take a long way to get there. Especially since all you have is a horse as well, so it's a form of padding, basically. And that could be part of your playtime right there. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, but at the same time, they did not have to pad it out that long. But content-wise, honestly, it's not that bad, but I wish they didn't pad it out so much with having to get around everywhere. Now, moving on to music. Music's pretty good. Not really anything noteworthy, but it's definitely good music regardless. So, now moving on to my final thoughts. I think the game is very good at everything but its gameplay. I think the gameplay is almost there, but it's ruined by padded out time, not enough really to the game, and also just the simple fact that the game doesn't control as good as it could. Now, does that make the game bad? Hell no! It's still a really good game. But I do think they really could have spaced things out more small. Just not as big of a world. You don't need that much space if there's nothing in it. But honestly, I think it should all possibly be fixed through a sequel. I think a sequel honestly would help a lot. I don't know if the people will actually do that, but if they do make a sequel, oh, I will buy it in a heartbeat, because if they can fix these issues, which they probably will, it could be really good. But as it stands, Shadow of the Colossus is still a really good game. And on my scale of 0 to 10, I give the game a solid 8 out of 10. I think it's really, really good, but it just has a few minor annoyances that just kind of make it not as good. But those are, of course, my own thoughts. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear me talk more about PlayStation games, then consider subscribing to this channel. That being said, this is NCSO7 signing out. Peace!